Okay. And also, well, yeah, I'm interested to the loan that you have disbursed to the microfinance. Yeah, is it Kordul Hassan, whereby the small medium will only repay back the
We'll talk about that
corpus?
as well.
Oh, okay.
You shared the presentation with me. I did email it to you. Okay, let me have a look.
Yeah.
He learned from you.
And also, okay, well, one of my concern is that since you have an office in Jakarta, right?
Yeah.
And the university, including my university, we are required by our minister to have a field experience.
Okay.
So we have the local zakat institutions,
Okay.
but it's not sufficient.
Mhm.
We need more and more other zakat institutions that allow the students to be attached
Okay.
for 1 or 2 months or maybe one semester, because what they learn in the class is just a theory.
Yeah.
Right, what is zakat
Mhm.
and asnaf, mustahik and things like that. But in terms of practical empirical experience, which is not covered in as a theory, so they need to be in the field experience. So that's why uh, I was thinking whether if you can connect me with the Islamic Relief in Jakarta,
Definitely.
so that we can propose whether my student can also be attached in the Islamic Relief Jakarta.
Because
And
we just one of our staff members from Islamic Relief, just from Indonesia, just arrived this morning. He's here. When we have a break, we might get him.
oh, okay.
Definitely.
What's so coincidence?
With him, we didn't know he was coming today.
Might have been on the same plane.
Not only, but we do have our country director.
Okay.
Nanan, I forgot his surname.
I can't remember his name.
He's there, and one of our chair is also a professor at university. He Park Ede Dharmawan. Ede Dharmawan. I think he's in the health industry.
Oh, okay.
I've got his LinkedIn details.
Yeah.
But he's our chairman. He's also part of the chair. The chairman, I can't remember. But he's part of the chair. But yeah, either one of those two you can get in touch with, and they can provide you with any insight or any information you require. We'll leave you with the contact details afterwards.
Yeah. And I'm interested too, because in Indonesia, when we talk about zakat, it's not only that we give.
Yeah.
We need to it depends, of course. If we have to look at the ability of the mustahik. If the mustahik is young, yeah, but is categorized as a miskin, we can give some capital so that they can move from mustahik into a higher level.
I mean, but Azul will give you an information of our program, which is all about the zakat.
So just on briefly, just to lay the groundwork, when it comes to the projects, as Brother Harun was mentioning, we've got two types of project. One is the humanitarian emergency response,
Yes.
and then you have the development projects.
Development.
So with the humanitarian, it's the earthquake has happened or the conflict has happened. Those are not going to move the person out from a level of poverty into a level of
Right.
self-sustaining themselves. So that would be the food pack or the emergency.
Yeah,
tent.
fully.
That's just completely emergency response.
Oh,
Then with the development, there is the potential with those
Okay.
for there to be that growth and that self-sustain, the ability to self-sustain for the rights holder. And then obviously when we have the orphans welfare program, it's a combination. Oftentimes when we don't work within the sector, we think, or it's easy for people to think that we should give them something to set them up, and then once they're set up, we can step back. It doesn't actually work like that, because even within the UK, you have people who are working, but they're still poor. In Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in many of the countries, even though you give them a source of income, it doesn't mean that that's sufficient to cover what they need. They may have, they may have a small fishing boat, or they may have a sewing kit. They can have some income, but they still need the ongoing support.
Yeah.
So in many of the communities, it's multifaceted, where you keep the work going. And ideally, the aim is that once they reach a certain level, that rather than being a zakat recipient, the household is a zakat giver, but then flooding happens, or some disaster happens, an earthquake, and then the community is stepped back again. So it's a cycle which we're always there to support to the best of our ability.
Yeah.
Dr. Crescent, you want to sit over here? Or do you want me to hand it over to you?
Either way. Yeah. So hopefully this will answer some of your questions.
Okay.
But feel free to ask.
Yeah, sure,
in,
sure.
In between. So Bismillah, talking a little bit about our approach to Islamic microfinance. Now,
Right.
as Harun did show you on that one slide that you are going to ask a question about, we've done this obviously for nearly 30 years now.
30
so
years.
We are Islamic League is really one of the pioneers in Islamic microfinance
Right.
globally.
Okay.
And throughout this sort of 30 years journey, we've probably operated in nearly 20 different countries. Now they change. So we had a very large program, for example, after the tsunami in Aceh.
Yes.
Where, as Adil said, we come in, we provide the emergency relief in the first days and
Yeah,
weeks.
or of course.
But then,
Yeah.
of course, it's the question, how do you rebuild people's lives?
Right,
You cannot
right.
constantly hand out
food. Yeah.
People need to ultimately stand on their own feet again.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
of course, microfinance is one of the tools in our toolbox that we use.
Right.
Now, currently, we are actually rethinking our approach to microfinance, primarily because the regulatory landscape around microfinance is changing.
Yeah.
So microfinance used to be an activity that NGOs were able to provide as part of their humanitarian or development programs. Nowadays, governments actually see it very much as part of the financial services sector, right, and have introduced specialized regulations.
Okay.
And for us as an NGO, we now have started to think our way around this. And we're also in the process of separating out our microfinance programs from our humanitarian programs. Because, of course, people who are
Development, you put it as a development, right?
Yeah, beyond the development even, because obviously, people who are working in what we call livelihoods, so providing, people with sewing machines, for example, and setting up with vocational skills training.
Yeah.
Now they still are ultimately humanitarian in the way that they think and operate, right? In microfinance, obviously, as you said, we're giving people Qad Hasan,
Yes.
which is a Dane, right?
Yes.
They have to return this.
The principle.
Or we are working in Mudaraba with them, which is a very different approach, of course, to our, our livelihoods programs.
Of course.
So therefore, our staff have to have a different mindset, and we take it even beyond the livelihoods programming. But I will tell you a little bit more about that. Just very briefly, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our business model in microfinance and the IR operational model and how that is changing.
Okay.
And then I'll give you a bit of a sort of introduction to a couple of products and sort of innovative ideas that we currently have on the go. Obviously, this is my presentation, so I didn't coordinate with Harun here, but this is what you've heard already. So, we've grown significantly over the last, 40 years. We're just celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. But obviously, essentially, we've remained a charity. And, one of the things, of course, it's really important to understand this from a legal dimension. Obviously, charities in the UK are clearly defined, organizations that have, specific charity objectives. So, relief, poverty, for example, or health or education. And of course, within that, you're creating, as we already talked about, particular income streams that are then, to be spent if they are specified by the donor very specifically on, particular projects. Obviously, sometimes it's difficult for us to understand also more broadly in the community and, within the wider sector, of course, how microfinance fits into, the kind of operating and business model of a charity, right? The idea is that you give
something
without the expectation of any return.
Right?
In microfinance, we are, as we said, we're creating a Dane, right? So we are ultimately expecting a return. We're expecting at least the principle to be returned, right?
Yes, the principle.
Hasan is the principle that's returned. If it's Mudaraba, we're expecting, of course,
profit
to be as agreed to be also shared with us.
Yeah.
That creates a slightly different approach. Obviously, ultimately, however, our microfinance programs are still operating under the idea of it being a charitable, done for a charitable purpose. So, the recipients of our microfinance programs are, still within that definition of our charitable objectives. They are disadvantaged, they're living in poverty, etc., etc. And ourselves, as a microfinance provider, we are not, even though some of our products are profitable, we're actually not seeking to make profit. So all the profits that we generate are being plowed back into our programs. We don't have shareholders. We have donors. We have stakeholders, right? So any money that we make on top of, in the Moldova contract, for example, goes back into the program. That program, as Harun showed you in one of the slides, has enabled us over the last 25 years or so to actually revolve about $100 million. Okay, and now the overall organization is, I think last year our annual turnover was about 235 million pounds. So we have far fewer resources in microfinance, but we're actually, as you know, using them far more effectively. Of course, we can actually recycle the impact over time. Right. Just very quickly, again, sort of just trying to sort of lay out, a broader kind of, context for what we do in terms of the Islamic Relief business model in itself. Obviously, we talked already about the kind of individual donations that we, solicit. So there's a fundraising appeal for a earthquake in Indonesia. Protect you and your people, inshallah. Right? That's how we raise funds again. There are, unsolicited giving like, zakat or qurbani or waqf. Allah has done the soliciting for us because zakah is an obligation, so people pay. We are just reminding them of that obligation, right? We do crowdfunding. We also receive, CSR funds
from
companies. Yes, not that many, but some. And also we have, of course, a whole host of institutional donors: the UK government, the Indonesian government, the Pakistani government, etc. UN agencies that are also donating to us. So it creates quite a diverse income stream for Islamic Relief, generally speaking. Just singling one out for microfinance, which we used was crowdfunding. So there we've set up donors in the US and Canada with beneficiaries of our microfinance program in Pakistan. And we're using effectively the internet crowd, to solicit for funding for a particular
project.
Entrepreneur who needs now, in his case, Naseem Bibi, she looks for $400 actually for equipping her shop there in Pakistan. So that's how we then connect the crowd, who can then chip in with $5 or $10 each until she's got her $400. When she reaches the $400, we're then paying her. This is in this case zakat Hassan that we have in Pakistan. We also have Murabah in Pakistan, where we then
only you collect full and then you give to
actually this is this is actually reverse order. So we already have actually dispersed
I see
the facility to the beneficiary in this case. Because we don't want
they do wait, right?
It's just to wait.
I know.
Could take 3 months. Could take 6 months,
That's why.
Therefore, we've already predispersed the facility to her
and replaced by the crowdfunding.
Yeah, we're backfilling it.
Improve crowdfunding.
So it's different approaches, obviously, to how this works. We started this in 2019. It's been running for a few years now, and it's been quite successful. It creates a new sort of dynamic, of course, for our donors. Now, particularly the microfinance operational model. Microfinance is, very different from our humanitarian work. It's also still significantly different from our development work. As I said, the dynamics are here very much that the people, our staff that deal with microfinance, they cannot think like humanitarians. They have to think really like bankers, with the heart.
With the heart, yes.
Bankers will have to, they will have to leave the heart outside the office, right? They will
purely commercial.
They will have to be purely commercial. Our people, as I said in the very beginning, despite the fact that we're not, transferring the ownership of assets, as our other programs will be doing, we will still, of course, try to achieve, of course, our charitable objectives from our clients. So by selecting particular types of beneficiaries. But of course, as I said, the mission focus is very clear in microfinance, so we're not a commercial microfinance provider.
Of course.
Already places us in many countries at odds with the regulator. Because regulators, of course, look at microfinance as part of the commercial banking sector, or subsector of it. and therefore, of course, apply rules to microfinance that are not necessarily applicable to us. So, one of the microfinance institutions that we have founded in Bosnia, they've been constantly asked by the regulator, for example, to advertise their effective interest rates, right?
As a reference.
As a reference to the consumer, right?
Yeah.
Because, of course,
As a
from a
reference.
consumer protection perspective, the regulator is just doing what, of course, is important in a commercial banking operation, right? Because there has to be transparency, there has to be clarity on the price for the consumer.
Right.
Now, in a Card Hassan, even though we might also use a Card Hassan with an administration fee, it's much more difficult, of course, to express that into an annual percentage rate. It's not impossible, obviously, but of course it creates also then issues around the confidence of the Muslim consumer in the halal nature of our Card Hassan, right? But we're trying to nevertheless be very client-centric, and I'll show you some of the client-centric products that we developed. But important to us, nevertheless, is sustainability. So, obviously, in the microfinance sector, generally speaking, sustainability means profitability.
Right.
And profitability has caused, of course, the microfinance sector really, significant reputational damage over the last decade or two. But sustainability is for us important. We have, not that many resources in microfinance available to us, so we have to really make sure that those resources that we do have are used as effectively and efficiently as possible. So we do, you talk about products, we have a product mix often in our operations. So we do have Card Hassan for the very bottom of the pyramid. We also use Murabaha, Mudaraba, maybe one of the non-poor beneficiaries that we work.
Right.
And that allows us to kind of, create that important balance between impact and sustainability.
Right.
And, my colleagues will tell you how much money they've spent, obviously, right, from the donations that we received. Now, we've never received 100 million, but we actually were able to create $100 million worth of impact over the last 25 years.
Wow.
So that's important to us because we are, as I said, focusing on sustainability.